Hello and welcome to this channel. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I am in the book of Samuel, book 2, working through chapters 4, 5, 6 and 7. So hold on tight, get comfortable and we'll begin. So we left off yesterday. Remember, there was a division. We have got two kings over Israel right now. We've got King David over the Judah tribe, and then we've got King Boshitha, who is king over the other 11 tribes. That's Saul's son. Now, Saul's son has his chief commander, Abner, who seems to have more control over the people than the king himself. Now, the king made an accusation to Abner saying that he'd slept with his father's concubine, which was complete lies. Well, it seems a complete accusation, which causes a rift, which makes Abner want to make David king. And as he's about to do that, David's nephew kills Abner when he comes to visit. He deceives him, brings him over because Abner had killed his brother. So there was a revenge on there, and that's where we left off, chapter 3. So now Abner is dead. That means King Iboshna has no chief commander by him, and he's not a very strong king. And he has two men in his tribe who were captain over the raiders who would go and raid different places, loot them and bring back the belongings. Their names was Rechab and Bana, and they were from the Benjamin tribe. Now it's midday and it's really hot sun out there in the desert of Israel. The sun is beating down, and King Iboshna, he goes to lie down. Now these two raiders decide to go in to the royal quarters, and they see the king lying there on his bed resting, and they kill him. They kill him with a sword in the side, and then they chop off his head, and then they take the head by night to David. Now David is in Hebron, and the two guys, they arrive there with the king's head, and they say, look, they think they're heroes. Look what we brought you. We brought your rivalry king, the one who wanted to kill you. God has now brought us here and freed you from this man. And so they're saying to him that God is on their side. God's worked through them to bring this man's head, the king's head, to them. Well, David says, well, yeah, God is guiding my life. He's guided my life quite a bit, actually. And he's kept me out of trouble. Then he explains to them what he did to the previous messenger that brought the news about Saul, King Saul's death, that he was killed because he'd killed an anointed king. So you can imagine the two men weren't maybe feeling so heroic now. So David is not happy with them. They have killed an innocent man in his own home, and he decides to get his men again to kill these two men. So his men cut off their feet and their hands, and their bodies are hung in Hebron. They then bury the king's head, King Ibosheth, in the tomb with Abner, his side chief commander, in Hebron. And that closes chapter 4. A pretty gruesome chapter, really, so let's move into hopefully a better chapter, chapter 5. Now in this chapter, David is moving towards becoming king of all of Israel. So Israel are now without a leader. Their king has been beheaded, and they're looking for somebody to take over the reign. And they approach David because of his reputation. I mean, he has killed Goliath. He has won many battles. He is a successful leader, and they want him to lead them. And David agrees to take on this role. He's aged 30 years old, and he becomes king of all of Israel. And it says that he reigns for 40 years. So he reigns right up until he's 70. So without delay, David's first mission as king is to take on the Jebusites in Jerusalem. Now they considered David weak. That's how they saw him. But he proved otherwise, because his army came in there and they conquered their entire city. And David then builds himself a fortress in Jerusalem, and he calls it the City of David. And he gathers more wives and more concubines, and he starts expanding his family lineage. Now the biggest enemy of Israel as we know, is the Philistines. They're the biggest ones to take on. So this is David's next big challenge. And so he consults with the Lord, like, what should I do? Should I take these on? And the Lord tells him yes, that he will deliver the Philistines into his hands. And he has many victories over the Philistines. They have battles and they win and more and they win until they successfully defeat the Philistines completely. And this ends chapter 5. So in chapter 6 we move on with David and the Ark of the Covenant. Now David, who is now residing in Jerusalem in his city of David, asks for the Ark of the Covenant to be ushered towards him. So he sends for 30,000 of his men. The Ark is to be put on a cart and led by oxen, and led by the two men, Uzzah and Ahio. Now on the journey towards Jerusalem, the cart hits something bumpy and the oxen fall, and the Ark falls. Now Uzzah tries to save the Ark and puts his hands on it, and unfortunately they are not meant to touch the Ark, and he is killed by the Lord instantly. Now when David hears this news, he's shocked, and he decides to name the place Uzzah as a warning to everybody, don't touch the Ark. And because of this as well, he's not sure whether he should have that Ark brought to him. So he has it left at Obed-Edom's house, and he leaves it there for 3 months. It's kind of like a waiting game. Leave it there, see what happens. And over those 3 months, Obed-Edom's house is blessed. Now when David hears of this, like he's had this great blessing over his household, he thinks that's a good sign. Okay, now bring that Ark to me. So the Ark is brought finally to Jerusalem, and David offers burnt offerings and sacrifices to the Lord as a gratitude and a thank you. Plus it's a celebration that the Ark is now in Jerusalem alongside David. Now Michal, David's first wife, during all of these celebrations, David's out there dancing with different women, and she's not happy with him. She thinks, my goodness, you're a king, you shouldn't be doing things like this. You should act responsible as a king. And plus, while he's dancing with these servant women, she becomes jealous. And at the end of this chapter, we learn that Michal never had children. So that closes chapter 6. So now as we open chapter 7, we see a very confident King David now, because he has defeated his enemies, he's grown his family, he's become surrounded by a lot of people who are looking up to him. And plus, he's got the Ark of the Covenant right with him, in his city of David, also known as Zion. Now whilst David is here, he consults a prophet by the name of Nathan, and he says to him, it doesn't feel right that I'm in this luxurious palace and there is the Lord in this covenant in a tent. He really should be in something much more grandeur. That's what he thinks. Now Nathan says to David, do as you please, you've got God by your side. So that's how he leaves it. But during that evening, God comes and speaks to Nathan. And he tells him to let David know not to build a house for him. He says he's never required one, and he certainly isn't going to demand one. God then tells Nathan to remind David of what he has done for him, how he's brought him from being a shepherd boy to defeating Goliath to becoming this leader, this king over Israel. And God tells him that he's going to build David a house, a legacy, a solid place for the Israelites. And he's giving David a reassurance that once David passes, his son is going to rise up, and his son is going to be aligned with God. So God will be his father, and he shall be his son. So this will be the first king over Israel to succeed his father. And God says to Nathan that if this son sins, he will punish him, but he will never leave him. And that's a big promise from God. God then finishes what he's saying to Nathan and says that David's throne would last forever. And then Nathan relays all of this news to David. I mean, David must have been like, wow, what a statement I have just heard from God. David then goes to God and he tells him how great he is. He communes with him. You are such a great God. You are almighty God. You are the one that has looked after Israel. how much you have given to the Israelites. And then David prays to God that he keeps this promise that he's relayed through Nathan. And that closes chapter 7. So that's our 4 chapters for today. So we've covered a lot, as always. So much detail in each chapter, and I've just covered the summary. If you want the full details, then please check out the links under this video. Thank you for being here. I hope this has been useful for you, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.